The guillotine is an execution device which today is most closely associated with the French Revolution, with the French king, King Louis XVI, and his wife Marie Antoinette, meeting their end when the blade was dropped on them. However, in medieval England there was a form of the guillotine which preceded the ones used in France. They had been around as devices for a while, however one guillotine in Yorkshire was greatly feared. The Halifax Gibbet was an early form of the execution device, and was believed to have been installed during the medieval period, if not the 1500s. So join us today as we look at the Halifax Gibbet, the brutal medieval guillotine, and remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. The right to have a gibbet was given to Halifax allegedly around the time of the Norman conquest of 1066. A law known as the Halifax Gibbet Law would give the Lord of the Manor of Wakefield the power to try and execute those criminals who had stolen goods to the value of 13.5p or more. It said, if a felon be taken within their liberty or precincts of the said forest, carrying stolen goods to the value of 13.5p, that they shall after 3 market days of meeting days within the town of Halifax after such his apprehension, and being condemned, it shall be taken to the gibbet, and there have his head cut off from his body. This may have originated around the time of King Henry III, who gave many rights to local lords of the manor John de Warenne. Within Yorkshire itself in 1278, there were 94 different privately owned gibbets and gallows used in the county. Suspected thieves would be kept in custody of the lord of the manor's bailiff, and he would summon a jury of 16 local men, who were sought to be the most wealthy and the best reputed from the local townships. The jury had to decide upon 2 questions. Were the stolen goods found in the possession of the accused, and were they worth at least 13.5p? The jury would gather in a room at the bailiff's house and no oaths would be taken. The jury would just decide guilty or innocent. The law was applied rather forcefully and was aimed to deter the public from stealing. Before the execution of a condemned person, they would usually be kept in prison for 3 market days, and on each of these were placed in the stocks and shown besides the goods they had stolen. Local people would then administer some justice by throwing and abusing those inside the stocks. After an execution would have taken place, another jury was assembled and would then give a detailed account of the execution. Interestingly, the punishment would be carried out within the boundary of the forest of Hardwick, and the gibbet was only around 500 yards from the boundary line. This meant that a condemned person who would have been brought to the gibbet could escape and run around 460 metres inside the forest, and could then be freed, as they could not legally be brought back over the boundary for their punishment. This happened at least twice, when 2 men cheated the executioner. One would never be seen again, but another would foolishly return back to Halifax, and was then captured and executed. The earliest accounts of a decapitation in Halifax was John of Dalton, who was killed in 1286. However, official records were not kept until after 1538. Between 1538 and 1650, a number of executions using decapitation took place. It was mostly believed that it was for thieves, however a number of other criminals could have been killed using the Halifax Gibbet. It wasn't certain when the gibbet was first introduced, but before then executions would have taken place using an axe. The Halifax Gibbet was unique in England. It was made up of 2 15-foot tall beams of wood, joined at the top by a beam. A square wooden block ran in between the grooves, and on the bottom of the wood was an axe head which weighed around 7 pounds. A rope was attached to the top of the wooden block that would hold the axe over a pulley system. Interestingly, the axe blade of the Halifax Gibbet was never sharpened. The weight of the axe and the heavy blade falling onto the neck of the criminal would then cause the head to be taken clean off. The gibbet could be used by cutting the rope or pulling out the pin that held the rope. Sometimes if a thief had stolen an animal, a cord would be attached to the pin, which could then be attached to an animal stolen or one like it. The animal would then be driven away and the pin would come out and the blade would then drop. The device was known for being an efficient execution method, that at the fall of the axe the head would then roll. Between the time when records began in Halifax and the area and 1650, a total of 56 men and women were recorded to have been decapitated, mostly assumed killed by the Halifax Gibbet. The final victims of the gibbet were Abraham Wilkinson and Anthony Mitchell. Wilkinson had been caught stealing 16 yards of cloth, and 9 yards were found in his possession, which was valued at least 9 shillings. Mitchell, on the other hand, was accused of stealing and selling 2 horses, one valued at 9 shillings, the other valued at 48 shillings, which was a huge amount of money. Both of the two were found guilty by their juries and were to be executed on the same day, the 30th of April 1650. In the 19th century, the remains of the Halifax Gibbet's base were discovered, and in the area were also the remains of 2 men's skeletons, who had died from having their heads severed. It's assumed that these belonged to Wilkinson and Mitchell. A few accounts of the gibbet would state, during the first implementation in 1286 and the last implementation in 1650, approximately 100 people were beheaded. However, due to the uncertain date and installation of the gallows, it's not possible to accurately determine how many were executed by the Halifax Gibbet. In 1650, the public believed that it was an excessively harsh punishment for a thief. It was said when an execution happened, the person who had found the verdict and the attending clergyman placed themselves on the scaffold with the prisoner. The 4th psalm was then played around the scaffold on the bagpipes, after which the minister prayed with the prisoner until he received the final stroke. Oliver Cromwell would stop the use of the Halifax Gibbet in 1650, a year after the final executions, and the gibbet was dismantled. It was against Cromwell's Puritan beliefs that the death penalty should be imposed upon those who were guilty of theft. The site of the gibbet was left neglected for a long time, until a full-size non-working replica was erected on the original stone base in 1974. On this is a blade made from the casing of the original, and a commemorative plaque can be found nearby for those 50-odd people who were known to have been killed by the gibbet. The guillotine in France was seen as a revolutionary device that came out of a need for people to execute thousands very quickly. It was seen as a symbol of the French Revolution. However, it's interesting to consider that hundreds of years earlier, the same sort of device could be found within England. Interestingly, it also did differ from the Halifax Gibbet, for example the use of an axe blade rather than a sharp slanted blade to effectively cut off heads. Even the Nazis would use the guillotine during their reign of terror over Europe, but in a Yorkshire town in England it would be pioneered and used. What is harsh though is the strict laws on theft that led to the deaths of dozens at the hands of the gibbet. One person could escape their fate though. If they did manage to run off less than a mile towards the boundary, they would escape with their lives. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.